Hi, my name is Sandra Kelch, and I wanted to talk a little bit about my piece, Evolution of the Metropolis. This is a 20-piece mural that is really about the development of the city that we know today, which I call a metropolis. It's really that city which has expanded rapidly in the last century, whether it be a vertical expansion or an urban sprawl. And this is, what's interesting about this piece is I created it where my print processes parallel the development of the city. So what I mean by that is it kind of starts out with the physical era of the city based on land and building, and then it goes into stylistic phases of the city, and then it leads you to the virtual city. So it really goes very much from the physical to the virtual, or you could think of it as the tangible to the intangible. And so there are several layers and several processes in this piece. So for example, some of the more physical processes were using colorgraph or using relief printing or collage-based printing, chincolé to be specific. And then it went into more transparent printing effects from monotype, and then it led to more digital processes where I would use the computer to create imagery for silk screening or for stencil cutting or for laser cutting of patterns into the paper. So I would actually print laser cut into the printed paper. So the process is really developed as the theme of the mural developed. And it's really, if you look closely at it, you can see that there are several layers of mixed media on top of each other. So there is everything from drawing to painting to even spray painting, along with many of the printing processes that I've already mentioned.
When you conceive a piece like this, do you know what this is going to look like at the end, or do you build it as you go?
I build it as I go. I mean, it kept building up and developing. What's tricky is I could only work on really 4 pieces at a time. So I just made sure that the 4 pieces I was working on would always merge with the piece next to it. So I kind of had to work on it in stages, and then of course at the end I laid it all out, and I saw the areas of weakness that needed to be maybe built up or developed or have more of a visual connection. So it was a tricky process in working with such a large scale. Is always going to be a bit complicated because the scale of it was so large that I had to work on it in 4 pieces at a time, because I really need everything within my reach to be able to work on it. But what I found is when I ended up moving to the next group and making sure they were visually merging, I had to make a lot of edits in terms of building certain areas up and making sure the visual connections were working well. So it really was a slow process of development to get the entire mural to work together. But in the end, it came together well, and I feel that it visually transitioned in the way that I had hoped it would. So I was really happy with the final result.
It's beautiful,
Yeah,
Sandra.
beautiful. We should be able to sell this, like for the right home.
This piece, Urban Surface, is really about trying to evoke the feeling of the urban space in terms of the surface, the rich surface made up of materials and influences from the city. So when you think of the development of the city, where there's building, there's rebuilding, there's garbage, there's different neighborhoods, there's different communities coming and going. There's lots of activity, lots of energy, lots of richness in the urban space. So this is an abstraction of the feeling of the city, and it uses paper ephemera from either industrial artifacts or different patterns that you might find in an urban space. And the process of this piece was very much about building up a surface where there was paper ephemera that was sanded down, and then there was painting and printing added on top and then sanded down again, and layers were sort of built up and taken down, and in a way that process is similar to the development of the city. So what's interesting about this piece is it really changes with scale. When you're up close, you see the richness of all the layers of patterns, but when you look at it far away, it really looks like a topographical map, not of a specific city, but of an urban space.
Sandra, can you talk about how this piece is is it different than your work, or is this piece part of a series of works where you're using recycled cardboard and papers, or is it?
I think my work gradually has been becoming more textural. I've been trying to find ways to activate the surface of the print. And a lot of my more recent pieces prior to this one were starting to cut into the surface or add collaged elements to the surface or fold parts of the surface. So I gradually was getting more textural and dimensional with my printmaking. And I am a huge fan of Mark Bradford, who's an LA-based artist. And after watching a few videos of him discussing the process of his work, I was really inspired to go back to the studio and to really play with ripping and tearing and layering and gluing and sanding. And I had a lot of fun doing it, and I definitely want to give him credit for being an inspiration for some of the changes in my work.
Can you talk about your life as a professor, teaching as a teacher?
I teach graphic design, so I don't know. I mean, I do teach workshops in printmaking, but my main teaching is in graphic design. So I don't know how. I mean, I could talk a bit about my identity as a designer and an artist and how that relates to my teaching.
Yeah, or how that relates in your work and how those things overlap.
Yeah.
The graphic, I mean, you definitely have a graphic eye.
Okay, why don't I talk a little bit about the background? Is this
You
on
have plenty
right
of
now?
time.
Is this
yeah.
on?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, no, you're good.
Okay, cut that part out.
Yeah, no, you're
Okay.
good.
Yeah, I come from a graphic design background, and when I was learning graphic design, it was very much a hand-based medium, and now it's very digitally based. It's changed a lot in the last few decades, but I still really love the essential elements of graphic design, and I definitely bring them into my work. So for example, when you look at composition and color and pattern and texture, all of these are design fundamentals that really transfer between art and design. So I definitely think my graphic design training is evident in my work. And I also teach in both areas, art and design, so I'm still very much involved. But I like to teach classes where there's overlap, such as design fundamentals, where we are learning about those essential elements that are part of any composition, whether it be fine art or design.
So how long have you been printmaking?
I've been printmaking for about 20 years. So it sort of overlapped a bit with my teaching, and then it kept growing in my life. I kept kind of falling in love with printmaking and wanting to do more and more of it. So I definitely made a choice at a certain point that I was going to go into part-time teaching rather than full-time to give me time to do my printmaking art. So it became a real priority in my life, and I am trying to lead toward being a full-time artist. So that is the direction that I really would love to move toward.
And then one last question, do you have a basis in architecture? Because it seems like have you studied architecture in a way? Well, some of your other works, I know there's a draftsperson quality to, it's like woven into the printing in a way that's really unique, and a lot of people do ask me if you're an architect.
Oh, really? That's interesting. I don't have any experience in architecture. However, I went to 2 schools that had very strong architectural departments, and I used to sit in on the critiques.
Okay.
Cooper Union and Cranbrook Academy of Art. And also, I had to study the history of architecture for my PhD because I was studying about the history of the development of the city. So I definitely I'm definitely drawn to structure and the built environment, whether that be industrial patterns or buildings or a cityscape or just dimensional things. I'm just really drawn to. And I also love the structure of layouts, when you're developing fine art or design. So I find that my love of architecture is really just about love of structure, I think, and space.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Very
Sure.